What's going on, guys? This is the Illegal Defense Podcast. We're going to get into it. This is episode 4. Got a lot of college football to get into and a lot of NFL to get into. Great games this week and a great slate coming up.
Yeah, and to start things off, I mean, some wild games this week. Texas got upset by Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a team we've been talking about a bunch on here. They pulled an upset. Oregon, big game for the Pac-12, able to hold on against Washington State. But we'll really get into this big Clemson game, the first real test for them. They go and on the road play Wake Forest, the number 21 ranked team at the time, and they were able to pull out a win in overtime against a pretty solid team. Definitely the biggest test for Clemson so far, and for Clemson, they're a team that people have a lot of questions about this year. Still, they kind of had a high rank, really more so due to Dabble's track record and Clemson usually just always finding a way to get things done. Last year was a down year for them, but they're able to pull off the win and avoid an early upset in a ACC conference that is actually looking stronger than maybe some other down years this year.
Yeah, I think DJ kind of established himself a little bit more in that game, too. You could see just I mean, to go to OT in that situation and then pull out a win, it does take some type of guts. It does take some type of it factor. So I think with that, he was able to kind of get things going. Seemed like the offense got things going. There's still some questions on defense, which is kind of odd because the defense is what seemed to be holding up, and the offense was kind of questionable as the year went on. But again, I mean, Wake Forest, they put up a great fight, and I think that was just like you said, it was one of the first tests really for Clemson. Also, it's in a sense it kind of worked out in DJ's favor because there is kind of those questions in the beginning of the season: is he the guy? Is he not the guy? Are they going to pull up Cade Klubnik instead? I feel like this would have been the game to if he did kind of show some struggling, they would have just put Cade in and just try to see what went on. But I think he did well. He obviously had a great game, and they pulled out with the win.
Yeah, and like you said, Clemson is kind of figured to be leaning on their defense this year. That's what they've kind of been doing, and the offense kind of shaky. But against Wake Forest, they were able to find a way to come out with a win. DJ, like you said, answer some questions, able to hold off Cade Klubnik. Seems like there has definitely been some growth there. I don't know if everyone is completely satisfied with him living up to his hype, especially when he was kind of in the conversation with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, and those guys are Heisman contenders, and DJ is, leading Clemson, but not quite at their level, or at least not showing that yet.
Right.
But definitely, like you said, showed some guts, and Clemson gets a chance to have another big game next week as they play NC State. We'll move on to some other games. We saw Michigan be able to squeak out a win against Maryland. They're a team kind of like Clemson, didn't have really great competition. Michigan actually had the worst strength of schedule in all of FBS, but they were able to hold on against Maryland. Baylor able to hold on against Iowa State, but a game that we'll dive into a bit more was a big SEC matchup. Florida, who was ranked number 20th at the time, went to Tennessee in a huge game for Tennessee. I mean, Tennessee hasn't beaten Florida in
In
forever.
years, yeah.
Yeah, the record is so much in favor of Florida, but Tennessee is a team that it's been kind of showing that they could make some moves this year. Their offense kind of came to life last year. They've continued to get the ball rolling, and they find a way to come up with a big win against Florida at home. Stormed the field, and happy days over there in
No.
Knoxville.
I think and Anthony Richardson, he kind of showed a little bit more spark this game. We haven't really seen it all season. There's been, I mean, we've seen it in the beginning of the for the season opener, but aside from that, he kind of struggled in passing. He kind of struggled, even getting passing touchdowns as it is. The
Right.
rushing was never a question because he's an incredible athlete. So I mean, just being an incredible athlete, obviously that comes with the territory of being obviously, what he is. So we just wanted to see. I mean, just in general, I think everybody wanted to see what he could do passing wise. He showed that a little bit in the Florida game, in the Florida Tennessee game. I think Tennessee was just it was just too much for Florida to handle, and we've been talking about Florida as well. So like, it's not like I mean, we've been talking about Tennessee as well. It's not like Tennessee isn't on the rise. Like they've been doing well. They'll have more tests on like with Georgia, with Alabama, they'll have those kinds of tests in the future. But as far as Florida, I think it's a good measure because Florida, I mean, to go into Florida and win that kind of game is also just incredible to do, especially with the way that home crowd is. So,
Well, Florida came to them.
okay,
But
yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but still, I mean,
But
in
yes.
general, to take out Florida is
Mhm.
is is huge. There's still a powerhouse team regardless. Like you can never really count out Florida. So.
Yeah. They're definitely a program that you know, great tradition over there, and obviously they've kind of haven't been what they used to be, but still, Florida at any given year can beat anybody. And Tennessee, huge win for them. I mean, they're a team that's been in the dark ages for years now. So to be on the rise and be in the top 10 now after that win against Florida, huge for their program and a great step in the right direction for a team that is definitely looking to turn things around and seems like they're kind of putting things together. We knew they were going to be great offensively, but their defense is able to make some plays and help out and they get a good team win here at home. So just some other games. Minnesota able to kind of handle Michigan State. That was a bit surprising to me. Oklahoma falls to Kansas State. Kansas State actually has we talk about the record between Tennessee and Florida. Kansas State actually has a winning record against Oklahoma, which is a bit
Pretty
surprising.
surprising, yeah.
Um,
Considering all the years that they've been like Oklahoma's been dominant for the past few years
mhm.
in that division. So
Yeah, so big win for Kansas State and USC able to hold on against the Oregon State team that's kind of showing some promise this year. Arkansas though goes into Texas A&M, huge game for the SEC. Two teams looking to make some noise this year. Arkansas kind of they showed some struggle in some of these games, but they've also shown that they're not a team to sleep on. Texas A&M, very up and down year. You know, huge problems with their offense. It's kind of been talked about all over the place, and they're able to get a great win at home against an Arkansas team. And yeah, I mean that's big for them. They had that App State loss. They were able to bounce back against a Miami team that
that's
lost this week against Middle Tennessee. Huge upset, and definitely ruined a bunch of people's parlays. As a minus 2,500 favorite
yeah, that's
to
crazy.
lose. But like I said, A&M, they're able to hold off Arkansas. They get the win, and huge win for their program. There's a lot of noise about Jimbo, and even Texas A&M fans themselves maybe not thrilled with the direction the program is heading when you land all these top 5-star recruits, best recruiting class
And
ever.
you're still struggling in a sense.
Yeah, and then you're still struggling. Your offense has left lots to be desired, and yeah.
Yeah, and it was kind of like it was really more of for Arkansas, it was really more of just KJ Jefferson or just basically getting things going for their
Mm-hmm.
offense, and it didn't seem like anybody else could get things going. Um, they strive in their run game. KJ ran great, but again, it's if you don't have other people aside from your quarterback, there's only so much your quarterback can do, and there's only so much you want your quarterback to do in those kinds of situations. Because if he does get injured, then it's like you're stuck with your backup. And granted, your backup's most likely going to be able to step in soon in the years. But again, you don't want to risk putting your star quarterback out there. So, I mean, it was like you said, it was a good win by Texas A&M, especially with Jimbo and everything, all the questions around the offense and all the questions around his kind of philosophy with his coaching. So I think that was a pretty good win to get. So
Yeah, and this is a win kind of almost similar to Clemson, grinded out win, took some guts to win like that. I think kind of the question with A&M is, it seems like this is the only way they do win with solid competition. And I think people would kind of want to see A&M kind of really take it to somebody in the coming weeks, and show that they could win more than just close games and games where they could hold people. I mean, that game was a very, very even game through and through.
right.
Similar yards wise, possession wise, and really just came down to the wire in a game that they win by 2 points. Arkansas, they pick up the L here, but they move on and they have a big matchup with Alabama next week. Alabama, who just throttled Vanderbilt to no surprise to anyone else, and they move on there. Utah, easy win against Arizona State, and two teams that we will talk about in Stock Up, Stock Down, and Ohio State and Kansas get the wins over Wisconsin and Duke, respectively. So yeah, we'll move into Stock Up, Stock Down. Ohio State really, they took it to Wisconsin and they kind of left no doubt. This was a game where people talked about it's either going to be a grinded out game or Ohio State's going to really run away with it. And they
Seemed like they did just that.
they did just that. First quarter, 21-0, and the game was over. Right? If Wisconsin keeps that game close, you could and hold on to the fourth quarter. You have a game. They want to play defense. They want to run the ball. They want to chew up the clock. They want to keep C.J. Stroud and the Ohio State offense on the sideline.
Yeah, off the field.
But once Ohio State turns it to a track meet and they start putting up tons of points,
Then it's hard to keep up.
yeah, it's
And I
hard to
think
keep up.
That's something that we're able to take away from the Ohio State offense is they're starting to get explosive. They're starting to show a little bit of promise, and early on against obviously that Notre Dame game, it was kind of like, okay, are there questions around it? Is Notre Dame's defense really that good? And as the season went on, we got to really see, like, obviously Notre Dame really isn't that great. They have a lot of questions. They have a lot of things. So it was kind of just a little bit of offensive continuity for the Buckeyes to really get going. But it seems like they're starting to get going. They're starting to get that flow now. But for some reason, I mean, I feel like Ohio State is never really the team to pick up where they left off at. They kind of like take some time to pick up their offense, to get things going with their defense, whatever the case actually is. But obviously they're showing a lot of promise this year with the blowouts that they've had, and they just look like a well-oiled machine on offense. I think C.J. Stroud is obviously somebody you could talk about in the Heisman race right now. So Ohio State is just showing a lot of promise. So.
Yeah, they're definitely hitting on all cylinders, and that's even without JSN. He just hasn't been able to get right this year.
Yeah.
Seems like they kind of made some mistakes by trying to get him in there maybe a little bit too early, and it seems like maybe now they'll try and let him rest a bit because now, unlike the first game where there was a lot of questions, this is supposed to be the best wide receiver group in the country, and kind of wasn't showing. Now they're kind of hitting full stride, and they look great.
That.
And, their defense too, being able to hold up and stop guys. We just needed to see an improvement over last year, and they've seemed to be doing that. So they're definitely trending in the right direction. As we said, Kansas, another team, 4-0. Their total over-under win total for odds was, over under 4 wins, and they've hit that in the first
Already.
4 wins. And they're a team, Jalen Daniels is really lighting it up with his arm and with his legs. They're putting up points. They're not squeaking out wins, right? It's not a team that they're just finding a way to grind it out, and that takes skill, but sometimes there's some luck involved with those kind of wins. They're just straight up beating opponents, and it's tough because Kansas is a program that's obviously known more for their basketball, but this year, they're able to make some things happen, and who knows? They're a team that if they keep it up, maybe they will be contending for a Big 12 title, and yeah,
Right. And I think the Big 12 is kind of open now.
yeah,
So
wide open.
It's like it gives them an opportunity to show them like, okay, here we've made this progression. Now we can at least compete with these other teams in the Big 12. Let alone compete with them, we can compete for a championship in the Big 12. So it works out for them in the long run, because it's like, okay, say this is more of a progression year, then next year they can bring in a little bit more recruits, bring in better recruits, bring in better quality from maybe in the transfer portal, try to get some things going, and try to build off of that momentum. And when you're able to do that, your program's able to make a lot more moves in bowl games and obviously championships. And again, the Big 12 is kind of open, so it's like there's more than enough room in the Big 12. Even if it's not completely open, there's more than enough room to have another powerhouse in that kind of not
Yeah.
to say Kansas is a powerhouse, but they can develop to be that.
Yeah, and first thing for them would be retaining their coach. Their coach Leipold is now rumored in possible candidates to take over that Nebraska job. Nebraska's certainly going to try to get a big replacement in there to bring their program back to prominence. And you show you could take a team like Kansas and make a turnaround like that. That should certainly put you on people's radars. Another team in the same state, Kansas State, with the big win over Oklahoma. And like we kind of mentioned it a little earlier, they have a winning record against Oklahoma, right? So obviously they're a program that they have Oklahoma's number. They're able to kind of figure them out and find ways to put their best foot forward against a team like Oklahoma that's always in the running to win the Big 12, no matter how open it is. But yeah, Kansas State, they go in and they get the job done. But we'll move on to some teams trending the opposite direction, stock trending down at this point, and that's one of them is Michigan State, right? They come out, they travel to Washington the week prior, and they get stomped out.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of a surprising game.
Yeah, that was a surprise, and they were like a 2.5, 3-point underdog. A lot of people taking them as a lock, and yeah, they just came out flat. Washington, put them kind of to bed early. They tried to make a run late, but it was way too late for them to actually win the game. And then they have a game against Minnesota this past weekend, and they just don't get the job done. They come out flat again. Minnesota takes it to them, and it just doesn't look like it's gonna be their year. I mean, they were able to have a great season last year, and you would think Mel Tucker would have them ready to go, and maybe some slippage was expected after having a Heisman contender and Kenneth Walker
go.
and just doing so well in that transfer portal last year. But this year they're just not a team that can compete the same level. But the another team we have trending downwards is Miami, right? They come out and like we said earlier too, they ruining a bunch of people's parlays, minus 2,500 favorite, kind of a throw-in game to
just to add on to your leg.
Yeah, just to add a little bit more odds. a little bit higher odds to your parlay,
And then next thing you know, that's the main reason why your parlay is
yeah, and then yeah, exactly, and they get smoked by a team like Middle Tennessee, and just disappointing for Miami. I mean, they came into to Texas A&M the week before. Some people thought they were going to win that game. They lost in a close game. Before that, they weren't playing great competition, but they were, putting up 70 points against some of their opponents. And,
right.
You knew that they didn't really have the threats, the wide receiver threats on the outside. But, yeah, I mean, to lose to Middle Tennessee the way they did, I mean, it's very similar. It's somewhat similar to the Marshall win against Notre Dame.
Right.
In that it wasn't close. It's not like you could say Middle Tennessee won with some fluke. I mean, points wise, you could look at the box score and you could tell that. But, Miami just really couldn't get it going, and pretty disappointing for a team that, Mario Cristobal takes over, and you would expect them to get some things right. I mean, it's not the end of the world, right? It's one loss, but man, it's a disappointing loss.
Yeah, I mean, it's one loss, but it's also, you expect, like you said, you expect Mario Cristobal to get these guys going, to start, winning games and try to bring Miami back to what they were. Obviously, you're not going to get them back to the U, but you want to get them to at least make some type of progression. And, we just talked about Kansas. Kansas is on the rise. If Kansas can do it, then I'm certainly... I think Miami should be able to do it. But again, it's kind of disappointing. But maybe they'll get things back on track. Maybe they'll be able to turn it around. Mario Cristobal, maybe he'll get his players to start playing and kind of shape up these losses. You shouldn't be getting losses to these teams like Middle Tennessee. I mean, that's not something that you should really.
Yeah,
that should really be even happening
for a team that people are picking to win their division and possibly go to their conference championship game. And, a lot of people's picks to do that preseason wise. This is the type of game that you have to win when you're going for those kind of things, when you have those kind of goals. So, yeah, Mario Cristobal will certainly have to figure things out and get them right. But, we'll move on to kind of a fun topic being floated in the college football world. LeBron James, mentioning a little jokingly, but, asking if he even has eligibility to come and play at Ohio State. A lot of people talking about, what that would look like, kind of, if in some fantasy world that LeBron James actually came and played tight end, how that would work. You have people chiming in, Brian Hartline saying, I got you. We already talked about this. You're good. Tweets out a picture of them together at that Notre Dame game. The Ohio State AD comes out and he kind of states the rules.
It's all good.
Pretty much says, yeah, you're allowed because you never went to college. You still have your eligibility remaining. He could come and play right now, making it known that it's definitely a possibility. But yeah, I mean, for a player like LeBron, who's in the NBA, one of the most dominant players ever, super athletic freak, maybe one of the best athletes we've ever seen
play the game, really
play the game of basketball, but maybe just regardless of sport, 6'8" guy, 260, super athletic, jumps out the roof fast. Just imagining him lining up at tight end in an offense like Ohio State's,
right?
It's a pretty interesting thing to think about.
I think it's interesting too, only because outside of his athletic ability and things like that, the reason why he's still playing this game at such a high level is because of his intellect. And it's kind of like we have those players like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees before he retired. The reason why they have this longevity is outside of their athleticism. And say, for example, if LeBron started out playing football and he played football at Ohio State, imagine what he could have been as a wide receiver, or if he could have been a tight end, whatever the case may have been. But it's like, I mean, at this point now, I feel like LeBron, I mean, you throw him in at tight end, what can you really do?
Right, and tight end is interesting position because it's one of the positions. One, it's on offense, right? So as a guy who comes from the NBA, I don't think there's many NBA players that can come and switch over to play the game of football seriously. I mean, just there's some physicality in basketball, but nowhere near the level of the NFL. But
Right.
if you were going to make the change, quarterback would be an easy one if you had the skills, right?
Yeah, you
That's
have to have
almost
the skill set for that.
yeah, but that's almost you're almost never gonna find somebody who could step in and be a quarterback. But the tight end position is a position where there's a lot of skill involved. You're on offense. You don't have to be as gritty and as physical. You could kind of hide the tight end. You could put them in packages where you're going to pass.
Right.
And, even if LeBron needed to block, I don't think he's going to come in and be a great blocker from
I
the
don't think he's going to
jump.
be Gronk, but I
Yeah,
think he'll
but
be able to
yeah,
be sustainable.
with his size and his athleticism, you would think that he might be able to step in and be decent enough to be in there on times when he does have to block. So it's not always, oh, LeBron's in, they're passing the ball, just
That
enough to,
to keep the defense honest.
right.
You know what's funny too? They were actually talking. They had a video. It surfaced recently, and it was like, oh, out of everybody, I think it was like on the Team USA thing, and they were like, out of everybody in this gym right now, who you think could play in the NFL? It was actually Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler was like, yeah, I could play for sure. Like, and then Kevin Durant was like, so they asked Kevin Durant, they're like, oh yeah, out of all of these people, who do you think? And so they're like, I don't really know. And there's like, oh yeah, Jimmy said, he's like, man, Jimmy's an idiot. Like, it's like Jimmy Butler. Really, what position is Jimmy Butler gonna play in in the NFL or in football? But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see what LeBron, maybe even wide receiver, because you got to think about it too. Like, a great blocking wide receiver is also really dependable. Look at the Larry Fitzgeralds of the world. Look at obviously, I mean, George Pickens. He's a great blocker. So imagine that would just be great. That would just allow a whole nother facet to your offense. So.
Yeah, and I would probably leave him at tight end. And maybe you flex him out when you want to sometimes, but you gotta love the matchups at tight end because he's not really getting pressed on the outside.
Right.
If you're Ohio State, you're going against top tier corners and stuff like
cornerbacks,
that.
yeah.
You have him at tight end. He's not getting pressed. He's getting matched up with linebackers
Yeah, and
and
he's getting
safeties.
way past
There's just no
cornerbacks.
shot. I mean, this guy hit somebody on a post route on a cover two, and he's gone.
Right.
But yeah, definitely some interesting stuff to think about there. We'll move on to our preview. Some big games coming up for week 5 of college football, and a game that we could talk about first is number 9 Oklahoma State going against number 16 Baylor. Baylor, a team that Coach Dave Aranda has his guys ready. They dropped a game against BYU a few weeks ago, but BYU is a good team, and Baylor's always a team that can recover, and Dave Aranda always getting his guys right. Oklahoma State, another team playing well. So yeah, like I said, number 9 versus 16, big matchup for the Big 12, a wide open Big 12 at that. So yeah, this will be an interesting one. Both teams are can easily win this game. Not a very large spread here. Baylor is only favored by 2.5 points at home, which tells you that on a neutral site, these guys, it'll probably
It's
be like
an
a
even
pick'em
matchup.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And just an interesting matchup. And both teams, come in here, and while all these other things are going on, right? We didn't even touch on kind of this hurricane that might affect a lot of football this week, and
Yeah, that's definitely going to affect a lot of things.
it might affect a lot of games. But this game is one that I don't think should be affected by that at all. And this is a game that we'll definitely be able to watch, and you can never go wrong when you see 2 top 20 teams go up against
at
each
it,
other.
yeah.
And for them to be in the same, conference is always fun. So
Yeah.
so a fun matchup for the Big 12. We'll move on to another game. No ranked teams here, but Kansas is a team that it's been making noise. We talked about them earlier. 4-0, already beating their over/under total. They're at home against an Iowa State team. Iowa State just went against Baylor and lost in a close one, but Kansas is a team I've seen people talking about. Oh, the voters. What are they scared of? They need to put Kansas and rank them. What are they,
Yeah.
cowards? That kind of narrative happening. A lot of people talk about how Kansas deserves to be ranked after what they've done so far. So this is another Big 12 game. And this is a fun one. Another one, like we said, shouldn't be affected by this hurricane. One that we'll be able to see, and not ranked, but definitely two good teams, kind of really right outside that top 25. Either one of them gets another win or two that you could easily see them being ranked.
Yeah. I think Kansas is at home too, right?
Yeah,
So
Kansas is at home at
that's
this
a
one.
huge effect. I mean, they're starting to have more people involved in these games. So I think with that, I mean, Iowa State had a great game last week, but
Hmm.
I think Kansas, again, just that momentum of having a winning streak just changes the whole spectrum of things, and then playing at home at that just kind of puts you over the top. So I mean, I personally would have Kansas in it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And Kansas, by the way, plus 3.5 here, so they're not favored at home. So something to think about. If you lay some money on, you get 3.5 points for Kansas there. Another game we'll get into, a top 20 matchup. This is number 2 Alabama going to number 20 Arkansas. So Alabama comes in, they just throttled Vanderbilt. Arkansas coming off that loss in a close game to Texas A&M. I mean, this one is a fun one. I mean, this one I thought Arkansas might have. I thought Arkansas was going to beat A&M last week. I thought it
Right.
was going to set up for a huge matchup with Alabama this week. Arkansas was ranked number 10 before. They fall 10 spots after the loss. But this one, I would have anticipated it being a top 10 matchup. Obviously, that's not it, but still, you can't sleep on Arkansas. The point spread is crazy. I think I was seeing it at plus 17 for Arkansas. I can see Bama running away with this, right? But you could also see this being a close one.
You could also see it being a game kind of like how Texas was to
Exactly.
Alabama.
Exactly.
Texas really tested Alabama. I think that since then they've obviously haven't really had a test.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it a few weeks ago where Alabama always has these games that they're being tested, especially with the SEC, and they haven't really had that SEC opponent to really test them. I mean, you have Vanderbilt, yes, last week, but it's like, what is really Vanderbilt compared to Alabama?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I think Arkansas, just like you said, they could either keep it close or they could try to, we'll see what happens. But I don't think Arkansas is a team that you can count out, especially with the way that they run the ball. If you have a great run game, that's kind of the counter to keeping Bryce Young and that offense off of the
Right.
field.
And what will be interesting in this one, it's a bit of a rock and meaning a hard place here where, Alabama has the number 2 rushing defense in the country, and Arkansas is one of the top rushing offenses in the country. So something's got to give here, and, we'll see how that turns out, but definitely an exciting game this week. And, with that, we'll move on to some best bets for the college football slate we have coming up. We'll start with a game that we kind of just talked about: Iowa State versus Kansas. We talked about Kansas being plus 3.5. I actually like Kansas to win outright here, so I love taking Kansas 3.5 with the points. I think that's pretty good value and something that seems like a no brainer. I like Kansas to continue with the streak. You know, like we said, they've already beaten that over under for the season on their win total. So I look for them to keep it rolling. We have Arizona State going into USC. This is Arizona State that, as we talked about in previous episodes, lost their head coach in Herm Edwards. They kind of, caught him before he even got off the field there, and pretty much let him know that they weren't going to be retaining him and needing his services anymore. They go and they got throttled, and they're walking into a number 6 USC team that had a tough time in Oregon State.
But I think they're
USC,
looking to bounce back though after
yeah,
that.
I think they're looking to bounce back. I think Arizona State, is kind of a team in shambles right now. They're not sure what's going on. They're recovering from losing their head coach. They're not a very good team. Before that Oregon State team, USC was putting up crazy points, showcasing their talent. I think USC gets back to that in this game before they move on to some tougher opposition in Pac-12 play. But yeah, USC minus 26 here. I like them more with the opening line. You could have found them 23 and a half. I love them at that. 26 is, not what you want to see really if you could get it lower, but I'll take the 26 and 26 points here. They'll probably put up, 50
They'll
plus
probably,
points in this game. And
especially against Arizona State that's kind of struggling to really find their ground.
yeah, I like them to cover, no problem. Another one, we'll keep it in the Pac-12, and we'll talk about this game that's, California versus Washington State. Washington State favored by 3.5 points. They just played Oregon pretty tough, an Oregon team that, besides that game against Georgia to start out, they've looked pretty good. They've, played some good opponents. They found a way to get their offense and defense kind of working together and pull out some wins. But yeah, Washington State was able to keep that game close against Oregon, had a shot that they could have won that game, and obviously the big upset against Wisconsin before that. But yeah, against a California team that hasn't really played all that well, I like Washington State's chances here, minus 3.5. That's enticing enough to me that I think they win this game by 7 or more. So 3.5 for me. I'll take that. We'll move on to Oklahoma State at Baylor. We covered this game as well, but Baylor minus 2.5 points at home. You got to expect a coach like Dave Aranda to get his team right and get the guys ready to go. A big home game. Both teams ranked highly. Big matchup. All eyes are going to be on them. Showcase game for the Big 12. So I like Baylor here. I can't bet against Baylor for big games like this, and I just believe in them to do what they need to do. And then we'll move on to a Big Ten matchup here. Illinois going against Wisconsin. Wisconsin coming off a tough loss to Ohio State where they just couldn't keep up. They didn't have the horses to run with them when Ohio State starts putting up that number of points. And I like Wisconsin to bounce back here, kind of take some of their anger out on Illinois. They're favored by 7 points. With their defense, I think they'll be able to kind of shut Illinois' offense down a bit,
Right.
and kind of run the ball out, hold possession a lot longer than Illinois, and get this win. Minus 7 is good for me. If it was minus 7.5, I wouldn't take it, but I like them by a touchdown. I think they'll cover a touchdown or less. So depending on what you could get this game at, if it stays at 7.5 or drops, I
mean, if it drops, I think you definitely take it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, if it's minus 6.5, minus 5.5, then it's beneficial. But looks like it's probably going to stay around minus 7, maybe raise a little bit.